Hello and welcome to So You Think You Can Dev, a KMS debrief on all things digital. Today we have Karthik Suresh on the show, and I'm very excited to welcome him because Karthik is the co-founder and CTO of Double O AI, a platform designed to make it simple for non-technical teams to automate complex workflows using AI agents. He is also a former product manager from Facebook and former head of product at Kraft, so he has a lot of experience with user-friendly products, which I think is a really important discussion as we're looking at AI agents. Welcome, Karthik.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Karthik, do you want to give just a brief introduction to yourself and your background for our listeners?
Sure. My journey started in in a very different place where I am right now. So my first job was more in algorithmic trading and high frequency trading. Started my career in New York. Did that for about 6, 7 years, and then moved to tech. When I moved to tech, my first job was I was the first employee at a startup called Kraft. I was there till Series A, so I was there for 4 years. I went through the whole 0 to 1 journey of, finding product market fit and build a product and operations team for them. And after Kraft, I joined Facebook when it was still Facebook, it's Meta right now. I was a PM on the search team and then on the Facebook Reality Labs. While I was at Facebook, I met my co-founder Derek through OnDeck, which is basically a community of people looking to start companies, and that's how my entrepreneurship journey got started. So right now we are building Double O AI, which is a platform to build no-code agents to automate any business processes.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to have you on the show, and we'll be talking a lot about agentic AI today. But I think before we can get into that discussion, let's really dive into what is agentic AI and how is it different from other AI machine learning processes and tools, or even the kind of marketing buzzword of agentic AI. What does it really mean?
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things which has been thrown around quite a bit right now, and it's almost like every person out there is kind of building some version of an agentic AI platform. So, in my opinion, you have the LLMs from OpenAI and Anthropic and Gemini and Llama and so on, and you have a bunch of open source large language models where that's the Chat GPT where um, so that's the Gen AI, generative AI, and it all got started with around GPT 4.0. GPT 4.0, what I think was one of the most defining models which started this whole trend, which enabled agentic AI to thrive. So what specifically agentic AI is like you kind of encapsulate the LLM, which is one of these OpenAI or Gemini, but also give it capabilities like you give it your knowledge base, you give it some memory, and more importantly, you give it like tools or function calling so that it can go take action in the real world. And that's when it becomes more from just a purely generative AI to agentic AI. The other way of describing it is like, think about an analogy of a human, you have a brain, which is LLM. And then but then you have let's say the hands and legs, which are the tools and function calling and APIs. So then you can actually go take action in the real world. So then just an LLM becomes an AI agent. So that's kind of another way of looking at things, but that's how I look at agentic AI.
Awesome. I think that's such a great analogy. Is the brain is the LLM and your action, what you actually do is agentic AI. I think that that's really salient and valuable. The other point I want to talk about is wrappers, which I think we're seeing a lot of these on the market. And a wrapper, one, why should consumers kind of be aware of them and wary of them? And what does that really mean for agentic AI products in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, so the wrappers, in the model which I just described for the agentic AI, let's say there's no like hands or legs, there's no function calling. It's a purely wrapper over the brain, and there's a ton of products. And I mean, some wrappers are kind of like, it's just like a bu bunch of hype and buzz, but there are some wrappers which are still like, doing really well and making monies because the UX or the UI around the wrapper is also valuable at some point of time. I mean, the classic example is like a lot of marketing vertical AI tools, right? Which helps you like generate a blog or write an ad and so on, right? So all they're doing is embedding an LLM inside and translating your requirements into a nice prompt and then shipping it to an LLM and then getting the output from the LLM and then displaying it to you in a very nice UI. So that's kind of how most of these wrappers work. Obviously, a lot of the times you could just do it using ChatGPT, but at the same time, there are some very nice UI elements you can add to actually productize it. Um, and so that's when the wrappers, kind of function. But on the agentic side is like now you take those wrappers, but you also provide them, like I mentioned, like a knowledge base about what your company is, and all the documents, and like kind of the tribal knowledge about the company. Then also give it access to the tools like a web scraper tool, a CRM tool, a Google Drive tool. So it's like not just like using the LLM to get the in this case, let's say, for example, blog. Let's take a blog example. Like it's going to read your brand guidelines from your company, and then it's going to also do some basic research about the topic you want to write a blog on. And then it's going to send it to an LLM with all these context to then get a really nice, more contextual, well-written blog, which actually matches the voice of your company brand. And then let's say it has a Webflow tool, it automatically goes outside and publishes directly on the website. So that's a more agentic AI version of the blog writing tool versus a purely a wrapper version of a blog writing tool.
For sure. No, I think that that's really helpful and illustrative of the difference. And to your point, wrappers aren't necessarily a negative thing. They can still be very useful because of the UI and the UX. And that kind of gets us to this larger point, which I think so much of the agentic AI conversation is really living on the tech side. What are technical teams doing with agentic AI? And I think where you specialize is how do you bring agentic AI to a non-technical person? And in that
Yeah.
instance, UX and UI is going to matter quite a bit.
That's exactly right. I think a lot of the agentic platforms out there are mostly for developers or technical folks. So if you look at the whole agentic AI land, there's frameworks like there's LangChain, Crew AI, and now of course OpenAI has their own SDK. Google has their own SDK. So you can use that to create your own agents. Then traditionally there's been Zapier and N8Ns, which kind of like workflow automation tools, and now they are adopting agents AI, but although they were never AI native apps. Then there are tools like workflow automation tool like Gumloop and Lindy and a bunch of those apps where it's almost like a drag and drop experience where you can easily um, assemble a bunch, not just like one agent, but like a series of agents to create a multi-agentic workflow. And then where we play is like it's almost like natural language driven agentic workflow automation. So it's like prompt to agent. It's like English natural language. You just go in and type and say, give me an agent which reads my calendar every day, identifies who I am talking to, and then go researches that person and sends me an email. And you just type it in, and then Double O will go build an entire agent for you, which does that work, right? So that's kind of how we are trying to make it accessible for even people who don't even understand what agents are.
Yeah, for sure. And I think accessibility is super important there, to the point of you don't even necessarily need to understand at all what's going on in the back end, as long as you can get what you need. Which I think brings us to another point of what's your approach for automating these workflows for non-technical people? I think we see often, especially with technology like AI, that sometimes the technology isn't really solving a real problem or isn't necessarily helping a non-technical person do the thing that they need to do. So what's your approach in automating those workflows?
Yeah, I think so when you think about an agent, like again, it comes down to what an agent is. So you have the brain, which is an LLM, for which you need to write a prompt. So there's a prompt generation, automated prompt generation, and prompt engineering itself is a big field where there's a bunch of things which you got to know how to like prompt the LLM to get it to do what you want it to do in the right way without hallucinations and in a more deterministic fashion. So the big part of it is like automatically generating prompts. The second part of it is giving it access to the right data on the right context. So different workflows or different agents need different kind of context. Like a marketing agent needs brand guidelines, maybe sales agent needs some context on who your ICP is, and so on. So that's context management. And then the last thing is tools or functions, which is basically access to a web research API or basically like a CRM API or a Google email API if you want an agent to send emails, or even voice calling if you want to actually make it for, make it do like phone calls. So making sure it's automatically configured, the tools are assigned to the right agents, the tools are automatically configured in a way that the LLMs know how to use the tools and when to use the tools. And you then assemble all of these in an automated fashion based on the client's instructions. And then you assemble all of these and then give it to the client in a way they can start using it directly for whatever task they're using. So that's kind of how the you take something from like a component-based architecture to a prompt-based architecture where you're just prompting to get this whole agent built for you.
For sure. And I think data, as you mentioned, is super critical in this. Are you finding that clients are coming prepared with data? Do they have to really clean it and structure it, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, data is like extremely important, right? I mean, so like you could a lot of these things you could just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write a blog or write an ad, but it doesn't have access to who you are
Mhm.
for a company or what your brand guidelines are, what's your voice, who's your ICP, who's your persona, who do you want this message to resonate with, what's your positioning against competitors? There's a whole bunch of things which is required for the blog to make sense. And that's where the data comes in. So the more and more context you can provide to the agent about like who you are, who your company is, what your company's persona is, what the company's product lines are, what the company's products are, what the geo is, like as much. This all comes down to how much ever data you can provide as context, then the better the output is going to be. And on top of that, like there's also situations where you need like customer support agents. Let's say you want to answer some questions about to your customers about some bugs or some issues or some features. Then it's not just giving like a small context. Then you probably have like tons of documents in Google Drive or wherever you're sure. And then there, that's where you need to talk about, we talk about like RAG implementation, where you have a RAG database, which takes in a huge chunk of data and then a huge and then chunks it in a small size and gives the agent access to only small chunks of data which is relevant to the question asked by the user. For example, if the user is asking a question about pricing, the LLM doesn't need to know everything about every single question and answer. It only needs to know about all the questions which talks about pricing, and then you give that as context along with a prompt, and then you whatever you answer you get back, you show it to the user. So there's a lot of data management goes in, and these days, I think there's a hybrid approach is getting more popular where there's a combination of a hybrid search along with RAG is, I think better served for a lot of the data use cases. But yeah, that's a whole topic we could probably talk about for an hour.
That could be an entirely new episode.
Yeah.
But I think as much as I want to talk about data management and everything that goes into that, something that I think might be a little bit more interesting, something that's not talked about often, is automation for cross-functional empowerment. I think when we talk about automated workflows, a lot of times we're looking at a very distinct set of actions for a very distinct person or role or department. I'd love to understand your take on what is the future of automation in enabling cross-functional AI adoption.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. If you think about the pre-AI era, it was the SaaS explosion of the SaaS tools, where even as a startup, you would have 50 tools. Every team, every function had their own SaaS tool, which is very vertical and specifically built for them. But now with in the agentic world, when the agentic tools are replacing a lot of the SaaS tools, we don't want to recreate the same world where there's like hundreds of SaaS tools. And now it's going to be a nightmare with hundreds of agents just like running around in your cloud with very little monitoring, observability. So I think where it will make sense is a lot of these very kind of disparate SaaS tools will kind of you should be able to combine into cross-functional agentic platforms. And the big advantage is, again, context management. Before, for example, there's a reason why Salesforce doesn't talk to Jira is because salespeople don't talk to engineers traditionally. But we don't have to have the same kind of a world in the agentic land where an engineering agent or a product management agent, which knows what the roadmap is, can easily talk to a sales agent, which is pitching a product to an end customer. And then the sales agent can get the market insights and convey it back to the product management agent to make sure the roadmap is clearly aligned with what the customers want. Now it's a hard thing because the tools don't talk to each other, the people don't talk to each other, so it's a very hard process. And with agentic AI, that almost becomes seamless, which is why I think whenever you think about building agentic AI tools, it's always very important to keep the context in mind. So you have more horizontal context. Even if you're building specific vertical agents, make sure the context layer or the data layer is actually shared across multiple agents so they can all easily collaborate and make sure that the collaboration, the cross-functional collaboration happens seamlessly between agents.
I think that's so interesting because there's a phrase, SaaS is eating the world. And I think the reason that that became really popular is because these companies would just buy so many SaaS products. Some of them have overlapping features. No one really knew how all of them worked. They didn't integrate. And it sounds like this AI agent solution could be kind of solve this problem of integration, right? Like instead of thinking about how different tools are going to connect to each other, it really is thinking about almost how different coworkers would work together. And they can all access that context to your point, make a more seamless workflow.
Exactly. The integrations is going to be the other part of it we didn't talk about much, but obviously there's MCP, which is like a standard. You can think of it like a USB-C cable, right? Which kind of integrates any cable into a laptop, for example. So that's a MCP. So it may enables any kind of a data set to easily integrate into an agentic AI workflow. And then there's the whole agent to agent, A to A frameworks where there are standards similar to APIs where an agent can communicate with another agent. So they both can exchange saying, hey, agent A or agent B, what are you good at? What capabilities do you have? And the agent B can reply, oh, these are the three things I can do. And the agent A can like, okay, I want you to do work on this for me, right? So all of these seamless integrations and frameworks are being built right now, which is going to make it really easy for cross-functional collaboration. Yeah, and I think that the even more like even looking ahead 6 months, even like agents which don't even know exist can eventually figure out or discover and kind of self-communicate, integrate, and start working with each other. And that's the world which is going to be like really exciting.
Yeah, that is really exciting. It sounds like it could solve a lot of problems. Now, Karthik, we're getting close to the top of the hour here, but I do want to ask, is there anything that you would like to leave with our audience? I think everyone's looking at Agentic AI, everyone's talking about it. Very few people are really getting started with it in a meaningful way. So, is there any advice that you would like to give to our listeners?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of the one disadvantage is like it's so easy to create an AI application. So there's a lot of vaporware around there. So I'll just leave a couple of things. One, um, making sure you are AI literate is the number one requirement for not just for your for the company, but for your job, for your career, for the future. So make sure you spend a bunch of time learning about AI and agents and how to write prompts and how to attach memory and tools to LLMs and how to build even a very simple agent which can write a blog or read your calendar or read an email. And that's going to be very important. And there's a ton of resources out there, to get that. The second thing is like before you adopt any agentic AI tools, make sure you run some pilots and make sure you ask to speak to some customers who are using the products and make sure the customer retention is pretty high. Because the best way to differentiate a good agentic AI product versus a bad one is like a 60-day or a 90-day retention. If the customer is actually increasing usage after 60 days and 90 days, you know for sure that's a good product. But if half the people have churned after 60 days, then that's not something you should probably use. So it's very important to like weed out all the vaporware out there and make sure you invest in really good and reliable agentic AI products.
I think that's such a good point, and one that you would think would be obvious, but it's not always, right? That your customers really are king in this regard. If they're using the product and liking it and retain and you maintain your retention, then that really is the biggest indicator that the product, the pilot, is worthwhile. So always get that customer feedback.
Yeah, it's like, the reason it's an obvious thing, but the reason you tend to forget is the demos are really great. Like it's you have an aha moment, you see something magical, and like, oh my God, sign me up, and you just give your credit card. You don't think about asking all these questions because it's so easy to create really magical demos, with using again AI to build the apps themselves. So which is why you still have to remember the fundamentals again.
For sure. Awesome. Well, Karthik, thank you so much. This was a really interesting, enlightening discussion about agentic AI, and I'm super excited for this future of these very autonomous agents just talking to each other and figuring things out. I think that would help us out a lot. Um, Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I am really looking forward to speaking to you again soon.